My first question will be, please tell me how you came to Ashland.
My father died in World War II, D-Day +3, before I was born, and my mother remarried when I was 2 years old to Weldon Clay Blanton Jr., who was my stepfather, and they were married in 1948, and that's when we came to Ashland, my mother and me.
Which neighborhood did you first live in?
I grew up and have always lived in the country, and my two half-brothers and I and our family lived on the Blanton Farm, which was a dairy farm at the time, at the intersection of Route 54 and what is now Blanton Road, west of Ashland. It's near Patrick Henry High School.
Do you have any fond memories of the farm?
Oh, yes. It was a wonderful place to grow up. I was able to have a horse. I was able to ride neighborhood trails. We had a lot of freedom, a lot of space. We learned how to do some farm work. And we developed a love of horticulture and things that grow.
Did you participate in any local farmers markets?
Not at that time. There was no such thing. My stepfather would ship milk every other day to Richmond Dairy, so we saw a whole lot of agriculture in work in progress.
Who do you think were Ashland's most colorful characters?
Oh, there were so many of great memory. Doc Hughes, who ran the Hughes Drug Store, and let's see, Miss Mary Byrne, who was quite a character. Who I remember when Lady Bird Johnson's campaign train came through Ashland, and the Secret Service was in town weeks and months ahead of time trying to make sure everything was secure. And the day of the train stop, when Lady Bird Johnson was on the back of her railroad car, Miss Mary Byrne took a beautiful bouquet of flowers right up the steps and placed them in her arms, and the Secret Service just had their mouths agape, but she was able to do it successfully. Ella Weems was an excellent teacher, but also a character, a very independent-minded lady. And I'm sure I'll think of some more in a second, but we had some wonderful characters.
What were some of your favorite childhood activities?
What I remember so much about growing up in Ashland is the freedom that we had. I had a best friend, and at the age of 7, we were allowed to be so very free in town. On Saturday mornings, we were given $2, and we had our roller skates. We roller skated all over the Randolph-Macon campus in absolute freedom. At lunchtime, we skated over to the snack bar and had a cheeseburger and a Coca-Cola. And then we went right next door to the matinee of the Ashland movies, and we had absolutely no adult supervision. We had no fear. We just had absolute freedom. I often think of Tom Sawyer.
What was the movie theater like?
The movie theater was wonderful. At that time, it was new. My first film in color was Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, and we thought it was the most beautiful thing we'd ever seen, especially Trigger with all his finery. And another memory of the Ashland Theater was, as a pre-teenager, we would all go as a group, and the Randolph-Macon College students, who were all male at the time, would come and make us laugh at all the right places because they always got the humor first, and they were there in droves. It was the first place in my life where I saw Elvis in a movie, and so it has wonderful memories. Our behavior was not always good, and the lady manager, Mrs. Stone, would have to come down the aisle quite a bit and correct us. So we have a lot of good memories.
Do you have any memories of any of the other stores or businesses here?
The Ashland Five and Dime. Once again, my best friend and I, we were about 6 at the time, and her mother was next door. or 2 doors down shopping at Cross's grocery store, and my best friend and I skated into the Ashland 5 and Dime with the wood floors. We skated around to the side aisle and saw the cookie bins where you simply roll back the door, and we entered into a life of crime that began and ended the same day. We each stole a chocolate cookie and stuffed it into our mouths, skated out very quickly, and got in my friend's mother's station wagon. She came out of Cross's, realized right away what we had done, and we had to march ourselves off to talk to the manager. So, needless to say, we never did that again.
What changes have you seen in the stores and businesses over the years?
Well, I think there's still a wonderful, how do I say it, graciousness by the store owners. Thank you, Kim.
You ready?
I guess growing up, I remember places like the old A&P grocery store, and everything had a wood floor, and it was, I don't know, so down home and hospitable. All the stores, of course, and businesses are much more up to date and attractive. Well, not attractive, but more current. But I can remember the painter's clothing store, wonderful memories of Cox's department store, where I had my first job at age 15 wrapping Christmas presents. And I quickly got behind, and the store's owner's wife, who's a very gracious lady, came and helped me catch up.
Tell me some more about your first job. Did you enjoy it?
Oh, I loved it. All of the farmers would come into town and do their Christmas shopping at Cox's, and so I learned to wrap Christmas gifts quickly, and I was proud of that job. It was my first money-making venture, and like I said, I had very nice people to help me when I fell behind. But Cox's department store was wonderful. Of course, it's now where the Iron Horse restaurant is. And I can remember young girls modeling some of the clothes in the store window. That was a good memory. And upstairs was the ladies' department, and downstairs was the men's. And it was just, this was Joe and Jacqueline Andrews, who were so very kind to me when I was growing up.
Have you seen any other changes in the town?
Well, I'm thankful that it's still sort of centered on the railroad, which is an integral part of Ashland's history. Oh yes, there's certainly much more selection by way of restaurants and places to shop and everything. But I remember the core downtown as being a part of my fondest memories. I think a great big plus for downtown is the Ashland Library. I am thankful that what is really, I think, the heart of Ashland is Randolph-Macon College, and I've always been thankful for the businesses that have tried to cater to students.
How has the college influenced your life?
I think the greatest gift about Randolph-Macon was I grew up a United Methodist, and I remember the old chapel and the old Sunday school building, which is now no more. But as a child, the old chapel was a beautiful place to me. It was on the second story, and of course the first floor was an auditorium for the student convocations. But I remember going to church as a child, and I would see the publication called The Upper Room, and in my mind I got the idea that all Methodist churches were upper rooms because it was on the second story. And it was a beautiful chapel, and it's now used for different purposes on the Randolph-Macon campus. But I remember the pews were curved. The whole sanctuary involved sort of a semicircle of pews. But I mainly remember the stained glass windows, which two of which have been moved to the new sanctuary on Henry Street. And I remember the preacher trying to reach everybody's hearing, but inevitably he would sometimes direct his voice over to the left, and then all the parishioners on the right would tap their canes or do something to remind him he had to speak to the whole congregation. Wonderful memories. The choir could not afford choir robes, so they wore their Sunday finest, and sometimes the ladies would trade hats because they felt that their hat did better matching another lady's outfit. Wonderful, wonderful memories. I think I also remember distinguished professors like Dr. Hall Cantor, who taught as a professor all week and then willingly served the church on the weekends, either as an organist or in any capacity. So I remember upstanding people like that who greatly influenced me. But I also felt so grateful to grow up in a community where the seeking of knowledge was valued so much, more than the accumulation of wealth. You know, we're educated, we can fight ignorance, and that was such a positive influence. Randolph-Macon was very generous to us as children. Like I said, they let us roller skate all over the place, and in front of Blackwell Hall, we would all form a big circle, skating round and round like a skating rink. And I think about the college library that always opened its doors to any high school student who wished to apply for a membership card. I did many a term paper right over here in this library as a high school student at Patrick Henry. I think of the college being so generous in sharing its cultural activities with the community, a great gift. And one of my happiest memories was when I was 8 years old and I was roller skating in front of Thomas Branch Dormitory with a friend, and one of the college students leaned out of the second-story window, flipped me a nickel, and said, "Call me when you're 16." I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. That was probably the happiest day of my youth.
Did you know anybody that attended the college?
I later met some young gentlemen who would come to Duncan Memorial United Methodist Church, and I dated a couple of these gentlemen when my parents would allow me to go to those wild fraternity parties, which was very, very infrequently. But in those days, Randolph-Macon was definitely a pre-mini school. It was all male, and it fostered many a United Methodist preacher because of their pre-ministerial studies. So it was a heavenly place for a teenage girl to be in a college town with all males.
Have the students changed over the years? Have you seen any changes?
Well, I think for the positive, what I've seen, of course, I am in 100% of support of the school going coeducational, because I've always felt that the school had a superb curriculum and so much to offer, and I think it should have been offered to women also when it did go co-ed in the 70s, I believe. Another interesting change, when I was growing up, it was heavily United Methodist, which is the way it should be because it was launched and supported and nurtured by the United Methodist Church. But I found it very healthy that as years went on, in many time periods, there were more Roman Catholic students here actually than Protestants, and I find that to be a very healthy situation. You know, the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of sharing within the Christian tradition, I think is very healthy.
What do you feel about student involvement in town?
Oh, I've seen plenty of evidence of that. The dance-a-thon, and I have been so appreciative of the students who, I'm trying to remember the nice gentleman's name who's the big environmentalist. I'll think of it. But anyway, a lot of students have entered into environmental preservation jobs around town, the planting of trees, the cleaning up of parks, and students have been employed in various activities and businesses around town. I do think that Randolph-Macon students do care about the Ashland community.
You mentioned Patrick Henry. Could you tell me some about your education?
I won't tell you when I graduated because it was in the age of dinosaurs, but I was the first full graduating class of Patrick Henry, and we saw a whole lot of historical trends and cultural trends throughout the history of Virginia, because at the time I graduated, we were not integrated. John M. Gandy was the African American high school, and they had a marching band that was so superb. I think Patrick Henry's maybe has yet to equal that, what they have, although it's good. So we were pretty sheltered in terms of the outside world, I think. Patrick Henry was the result of the consolidation of 4 high schools in western Hanover County. I'm thankful I got to know friends who lived in the outlying areas of Hanover County because the 4 schools did consolidate. I never would have been able to know people from Rockville or Montpelier or Beaver Dam or Doswell. Candidly, a lot of those good students up in the country did not trust Ashland students. They thought Ashland was uppity and sort of intellectual elitist. So it was good that we all got together in this part of Hanover County, I think.
What were some of your favorite classes?
At Patrick Henry?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I always wanted to be a teacher, so I enjoyed, I think, many different academic areas, especially having to do with the liberal arts. I also remember excellent home economic teachers that taught me so much, home nursing, cooking, sewing, and it's interesting how you think back, and they taught me life skills, and I remember those courses so very well.
Have you seen any changes in education?
Well, of course, we did have integration, which I think was exactly right and extremely healthy. One thing that pleases me about Hanover County schools, it's my understanding that only about 22 or 23% of American students finish 4 years of college. So I'm a strong believer in the community college system. And also it pleases me that Hanover County is developing these trade schools, because so many young people will finish high school and maybe not go on to further education right away, but go into a trade, which we so greatly need. So that is something I think that's so very positive.
Were there any problems with integration?
Not huge problems, but there were definitely good days and bad. And by and large, I think we were fortunate. Ashland does not have a squeaky clean record in terms of race relations. I believe back in the late 1890s or the early 1900s, there was a race riot here that was so profound they had to call in the National Guard. So by and large, I think we've been extremely lucky to respect each other and live side by side, but Ashland by no means is driven snow.
How has having the train and the railroad tracks in the town shaped your life?
Well, for me, it's a family issue because my stepfather's first cousin was Schertz Blanton, and he was the gentleman who became a paraplegic after trying to stop a robbery in Richmond in the early 1950s, and he was given only a short time to live. He was confined to a wheelchair and lived in the big, huge white frame house on the railroad tracks, which is now owned by the college, and with the wide front hallways. So he started waving at the trains as they came through. He's another one of our legends, Schertz Blanton, and I wrote his biography for the Ashland yearbook, for the 150th yearbook. And he became, of course, very despondent. He was a young man and a prize baseball player, a champion baseball player, And he became very despondent over his physical limitations and what had happened to him. And a friend of his on the RF&P railroad line, Jimmy Zahn, stopped one day and said, "Shirts, you got to snap out of this." And he gave Shirts a flashlight to wave to every single train that came through. And Shirts later became a hero for the railroad because he discovered things like hot boxes and trouble on the cars, and has really was credited for saving lives. But it came to the point where Shirts became the best friend of the railroads, and everybody would wave. They would stop at Christmas and bring him presents. It's a wonderful story. It really is. So we have personal family connections to the railroad. But I have always loved having the railroad as part of our town. And I think what's so opportune for Ashlanders is you can park your car in Ashland and be in Washington, D.C. in 2 hours, and New York in 6 hours, and it's wonderful. I hope I pray that we'll always have passenger train service.
What do you remember about the train service in Ashland over the years?
Well, I can remember all the years that it ceased, that we didn't have any passenger service at all. I remember the Santa Claus trains that everybody loved, that would come and pick up all the children and their parents and take them to Richmond on the train ride, because Bob Jeffers, another relative of mine, played Santa Claus. But I can remember all those years where no trains ever stopped. That, if you wanted to catch a train, you had to go to Richmond. So I was awfully glad when it started again, and I would just pray that it'll keep going. The latest controversy about maybe stopping passenger service, I think, would be just a real heartache. I hope they won't.
What do you feel about the petitions and the efforts to keep the train services going?
Well, I've signed them. I'm in full support. And I can understand both sides. They want the high-speed train, but it seems to me they could route that through Hanover Courthouse. I can understand about the ACA yards in Richmond, what a bottleneck that is, but I don't know. I still hope they'll keep passenger service.
Did any of your relatives ever work for the railroad?
My stepfather's grandfather was Captain Rice, and he was one of the early conductors on the RF&P, especially, I believe, the accommodation train. And they would stop the train. He lived on South Center Street. They would even stop the train right in front of his house to pick him up.
How does it feel to live in the center of the universe?
Well, I think we're very blessed. And then my husband and I still live outside of town near Patrick Henry High School, but of course we take part in many town activities. My husband's in the Ashland Kiwanis Club. I'm in the Women's Club, the Garden Club. I just think we're so fortunate. We have the best of both worlds. We're 18 miles from Richmond. Once again, we have the marvelous cultural opportunities by living in a town with a good college. Once again, we have train service to other cities on the eastern seaboard. So I think we have the best of both worlds. We have small town America, but we have easy access to more urban areas.
Tell me some more about the organizations you've been a member of.
Well, the Women's Club of Ashland is especially enjoyable for me. 1896, it was started by a group of faculty wives at Randolph-Macon. And I can remember the days when my mother was a member of the Women's Club of Ashland, and every Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, she would put on her white gloves and her hat and go to the meetings. And later on, the gloves and hat went, but the ladies still dressed up. And they often met in the choir room at Duncan Memorial. And as time has gone on, we've gotten a little more casual in our apparel. But every lady member, there are 35 members, is required to write a paper once a year on a subject of interest and present the paper to the other club members. and the paper needs to be about 40 to 50 minutes long, and you promise to yourself and to God that you won't plagiarize. You don't have to footnote. But some of the papers I've been privileged to hear over the years have just been superb. So it's like being lucky enough to go back to college again without paying the tuition. It's, it's a wonderful group, and I think there are ladies' literary societies all over. There are all over Virginia, like the Women's Club of Ashland. Some in particular are a little more demanding. I believe there is one in Charlottesville or Lynchburg or Roanoke, I can't remember, where you have to study a Shakespearean play every year, and you are assigned an aspect of the play to write about the characters or the setting. And so now that would be hard. I don't know that would be very enjoyable for me, but ours is a little more loosely organized, where you write on a topic that you've always wanted to know more about.
What are a few of your favorite papers?
I thoroughly enjoyed, I thought I was going to get run out of town on a rail, but my first paper was to revisit and take a second look at Robert E. Lee. And I knew I was on dangerous ground because he's revered as a god. And unfortunately, I don't think that's what he ever would have wanted. And he was not a perfect man. So that was my first paper, a present-day light on Robert E. Lee. And I remember my sweet, wonderful mother picking up the telephone and calling me and saying, "You're surely not going to say anything bad about him, are you?" But taking a long, hard look from a revisionist history standpoint is fascinating. And remarkably, my paper was well received. I got a lot of positive comments about it.
Do you have any memories of any of the other members?
Oh, yes. They were just marvelous ladies. Mary Ruth Lancaster, who used to be a librarian at Randolph-Macon College right here. Dorothy Jones, a retired college professor who in her last years went blind but never lost her positive attitude. She's just a brilliant lady. Marion Herget, whose father and mother bought the Herald Progress and were editor and publisher for years and years. I mean, we had exceptional ladies who departed this life for a better one. But so many wonderful, brilliant minds, and just great ladies.
Did you celebrate the Century of Tuesdays?
Yes, we did. In 2006, in fact, across the street in what used to be the president's home at Randolph-Macon, we planted a tree. It's still there. Funny, I looked at it today. It's still there. We planted a tree in the backyard to commemorate the Women's Club of Ashland's 100th anniversary.
So what are your plans for future papers? Do you have any lined up?
Well, this coming year I don't have to write a paper because I am chairman of the social committee, so I'll be in charge of the two social events. But my next paper is going to be about all of the Randolph-Macons all over Virginia. Randolph-Macon Academy in Front Royal, and I believe there was a Randolph-Macon prep school in Danville, the first Randolph-Macon College for Men in Boynton. I've already visited that site in Mecklenburg County, and one of the dormitory walls are still there. The parts of the building are still there. Randolph-Macon Women's College in Lynchburg, which of course has undergone a great transition in their history. But I just want to write about all of the Randolph-Macons and the history and the heritage and the beginning. That'll be my next paper.
Could you tell me more about the club teas?
We have two big social functions each year, one at Christmas, the first Tuesday in December, and then the first Tuesday in March. And we can invite two guests, and they're usually at Duncan Memorial in the Fellowship Hall. And one of our members will present a paper, and it's always very enjoyable, and it's a whole lot of fun to invite our friends and neighbors to come.
Do you attend church here?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a member of Duncan Memorial United Methodist Church still, and have been since a long time, other than the hiatus when my husband and I lived in Richmond. We were Presbyterians, but Duncan Memorial is an integral part, I think, of the Ashland community. And, of course, it always has been, I hope it always will be, the college chapel for Randolph-Macon.
Do you have any memories of any special experiences there?
Well, I remember having joyful times in Sunday school, the junior choir, but I also remember when we as a whole church marched from the old chapel into our new sanctuary, which was built in the mid-50s, 1950s, at the corner of Henry Street and College Avenue, which is its present location, and we all marched like little Christian soldiers from the old chapel to the new, and holding banners, and that was a day of special memory.
What kinds of events have there been
At Duncan Memorial?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we always are looking for ways to involve more college students to be more affiliated with Randolph-Macon students. So we've started a contemporary service with very modern music, which is good. Margie Turbyfield works with the Randolph-Macon students now, who once again are into religious studies and studying for the ministry. And I remember as a teenager where Randolph-Macon College students, and sometimes the married students and wives, would be our youth directors for United Methodist Youth Fellowship. So we've always tried hard to maintain a close relationship. Randolph-Macon has been very, very generous to our church. They allow our youth to use the Brock Center, and they allow our church to use Blackwell Hall and other classrooms for our Sunday school. So there's always been a wonderful relationship between the college and my church, and I pray that it will always be.
Can you tell me a little about your church leaders?
The church leaders. We have a fine pastor now, Bob Lynn, Emory and Henry graduate, another good Methodist school. One thing that I've always appreciated is we have wonderful Sunday school instruction, because a lot of times it's done by professors from Randolph-Macon. I think in particular of Dr. Stephen Toole, who's no longer here. He's now at a Presbyterian seminary in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But his instruction was just superb. And Dr. Ira Andrews is another one who comes to mind. He is a retired dean, but he's always done a wonderful job to teach Bible studies, like to women's circles and to Sunday school participants.
Ira Andrews also teaches at the school, I believe.
Yes. I think he does still teach part-time, even though he's retired. He retired as, I believe, academic dean, or one of the deans.
What do you feel about Duncan Memorial's aspects and influences on the community?
I think we definitely have a place in the community. We are somewhat landlocked in terms of expansion, but there's no reason why we can't expand going up. I think we are where we should be. There's been some talk about maybe purchasing land outside of town and relocating the church, but I think that would be a very sad choice, because we need to be here and affiliate with the town and affiliate with the college community, I think. So if we start a new church right outside of town, I hope it will be the birth of a new Methodist church, and let Duncan Memorial continue as it is.
What do you do for recreation in Ashland?
My husband belongs to the YMCA. I enjoy walking very much, and I love walking up the trail north of town, because at one time in Ashland's history, in the early 1900s and before, there was sort of a park-like setting up there, and some of our older residents, like Mrs. Louis Wright, Sarah Wright, can remember as a Girl Scout going up to this location north of town, and there was a lake, and there was a cabin, and she remembers as a child, as a Brownie Scout, going to that cabin. So I sort of enjoy that trail that goes north and loops around, like near Gandy School. And one thing that I learned 2 nights ago was that the famous bicycle tree over by the Kappa Sig house, it's split in half, and half of it has fallen. I ran over there. I went to this wonderful Kiwanis program Monday night where Nancy Hugo talked about remarkable trees of Virginia, and she has a picture of the bicycle tree where the bicycle wheel grew into the trunk. And I'm understanding from Mr. Randy Robertson that our wonderful tree may have to come down because it's split in half. And I ran over there, and sure enough, half of it, with all this wild weather we've had. So we may have to give up our bicycle tree. Have you heard of the bicycle tree? But we'll always have pictures. She's got a picture of it in her book, which is coming out this fall.
Was it struck by lightning?
It was either lightning or wind. But if you go look, half of it is over. Half of it is gone.
What are the major gathering places in Ashland?
Oh, me. Let me see. I would say the fountain at Randolph-Macon. The Hanover Arts and Activity Center has a wonderful history of being a community draw. And those are the two I think of the most, the Y and the Hanover Arts and Activity Center. And, of course, the various churches around town. Activities at the schools, parades. Excuse me, I especially enjoyed the Ashland Coffee and Tea because several groups meet there, and I'm a member of a political group that meets there the first Saturday of every month on Saturday morning.
What political group is that?
It would be the Hanover County Democratic Committee, and we meet there at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, the joke is, years and years ago, the Democrats were prolific, and then the Republicans sort of have more of a base in Hanover County now. But it used to be a few years ago there were very few Democrats, but they're increasing in number. And so it really is the gathering place for the whole Democratic party of Hanover County. And so we meet there. We meet in that room where they have musical performances. You know, it's sort of nice, and we have guest speakers and so on and so forth.
Are you interested in any town politics?
Excuse me?
Are you interested in any town politics?
Well, we are not voting residents within the town. We're outside of the town limits. So I guess my major interest is Western Hanover County, and we're represented by Mr. Bucky Stanley, who I think has done a good job as a public servant. I do have great admiration for the town council and those citizens who are willing to step up and serve, be it on the planning commission or the town council, but we really are not directly involved because we are outside of the town limits.
Do you know how long Ashland Coffee and Tea has been here?
Let me see. If I had to guess, I'd say long, about 6 to 8 years. And it's really is a wonderful place to meet your friends and sit over at a side table and solve the problems of the world.
Have you met any interesting people there?
At Ashland Coffee and Tea? Well, other members of the Hanover County Democrats, and every now and then, like if I'm involved in some type of civic work, we'll meet there, you know, for like a subcommittee meeting or something.
Have you attended any of the parades here?
Yes, the 4th of July parade is always great fun. There are times that we've watched it. There are times that a few times we've been in it. But we've always enjoyed the festivities there. Now, my husband, being a member of the Ashland Kiwanis Club, is on the committee for the holiday parade, and that's always a lot of fun. It takes a great deal of planning. I think he's worked on that committee for about 5 or 6 years. So the old-time holiday parade is also great fun. Really enjoy watching that. I don't think I've ever participated.
Mm-hmm. I heard there's a Beagle Brigade.
Yes, a beagle, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and animals take part in both parades.
Mm-hmm.
They really do, and I always love to see the Humane Society because we adopted a dog from the Humane Society.
What kinds of events take place in the parades? Like, what kind of organizations are involved?
In the holiday parade, it's great. They have high school bands.
Mm-hmm.
They have notable figures like they always have a marshal, a grand marshal, and youth organizations, horseback riders, antique cars, and they have the group that has the little mini cars, the Shriners, with their little mini cars, and it's always fun. Churches participate and scout groups, and definitely community oriented.
Have you been to any street parties or anything like that?
1 or 2, which are great fun, and I really am in favor of what they've done at the library with the plaza and the statues and the memorials and the bricks, and so those are great fun. 1 or 2. Mm-hmm.
What about the Strawberry Fair?
Strawberry Fair is always enjoyable, and we as a church participate, usually having a bake sale and a rummage sale. I think Randolph-Macon was very wise to ask them to move it to the street, because I do feel the campus is so beautiful, and it wasn't real easy to have the grass trampled. So I think the Strawberry Fair is still very successful, even though it's been moved to the streets. And unfortunately, this year the heat sort of did us in, but it amazes me the crowd that it draws. And also, I enjoy the musical performances so much at the different stages. I think that's a great idea.
Are there a lot of local bands?
I believe this past year what struck me most were the number of choirs and choral groups that performed. I've certainly heard some bands, and of course we always enjoy the Hanover Heartthrobs in the Ashland Variety Show. My husband and I have participated in that for many years, and that is so much fun. Everybody laughs and says one half of the town gets up on the stage and makes fools of themselves, and the other half pays good money to come watch. So it's a wonderful community event. I'm glad it's every other year because it involves a lot of work and a lot of rehearsal time, but it's so much fun.
What did you do in the variety show?
I have sung in the gospel choir, and I've sung in various numbers with other ladies, and my husband is famous for dressing up as Elvis, and my son put his picture in his Elvis costume on MySpace.com without his permission, and all of my son's friends just got a real big kick out of it. So everybody has a good time.
Do you remember when Dick Gillis was mayor?
Yes, it's a very kind gentleman. We miss him a whole lot. And he would always lead us all in song at the end of the variety show, the famous Ashland song that Dougie Zeno and Marion Herget wrote, Ashland, Center of the Universe. And so he is greatly missed.
Do you remember the Ashland Bicentennial?
The 100-year anniversary. Those were the years when my husband and I were residing in Richmond. So we didn't take primary part in that.
What do you feel about the expansion of Ashland?
Oh, me. I guess maybe my husband laughs and accuses me of being a tree hugger. But I'm a conservation is without question, and I make no apologies. I think as long as we can preserve and protect as much open space as possible, I just don't think development is always the answer. So if it's carefully planned, but I don't see much sense in building a lot more houses at this point in time with so many on the market.
What do you feel about like the growth along 54?
East or west or both?
Both.
Well, I grew up on just off the western part of Route 54. If a person owns farmland, it's certainly his right to develop. And, that's all I'll say. Ownership of property within the zoning laws means that you can certainly do what you want.
What do you think are the most important qualities to people that live in your neighborhood?
Well, in my neighborhood, I appreciate the fact that so many people are civic-minded. They're willing to do neighborhood cleanups. They're willing for us to belong to a civic association to protect the best interest of our community as a whole. So I'm very thankful for a good, strong civic association, which my husband and I belong to.
And do you have any interesting neighbors now?
Interesting neighbors. Oh, yes. Right across the street, we have a lady who does marvelous work with counseling, and she's now doing it out of her home. So my husband and I take special care not to notice who's over there, to respect their privacy. I don't know, we just have nice neighbors. I know that.
Do you know of any professors living in the area?
Well, Reverend Andrews and his wife live sort of right around the corner. Thank you, Kim. And various members of the college faculty and administration have lived in their neighborhood over the years.
Have you struck up any friendships with any of them?
I'm very close to our Andrews and his wife, Ann. They're very dear friends. And sadly, we just lost Dr. Unger, a brilliant professor. And thankful that his wife, Arlene, is still in our neighborhood. That's what comes to mind. Those people come to mind right away. Oh, and another marvelous couple have moved into our neighborhood, and he is the Reverend Mark Ogren, who is the district superintendent of the Ashland District of the United Methodist Church, and his wife Margie, who is connected with my church and also with Randolph-Macon with the Bailey Scholars. They've moved into our neighborhood. Very thankful.
What do you think makes Ashland so special?
I think people genuinely care about the community, and I also think that people work hard to be fair, to be generous to all races and all religions, and I think that is a marvelous gift. To acknowledge the worth of everybody, regardless of race or skin color, and I think people, by and large, are well educated, and they want to work hard to have a healthy, safe community.
What do you feel about the 150 events that are coming up?
Oh, I think they're so much fun. I've done a lot of typing for the yearbook. I wrote 2 articles for the yearbook, but I am trying to help type and proofread. And a lot of my close friends are heavily involved with it, like Miss Stevenson and Miss Tucker, and it's great fun. I look forward to the celebration in October with 150 birthday cakes. I think that'll be a hoot. And it's just a great idea. And I love the idea of the yearbook, because there's so many families in this county and this community that I wanted to know about. more about, and now I'll be able to. And it just seems to be such a success, because from what I've heard, so many more people have submitted articles than we ever imagined. So it's going to be a great book. It really is, and I'm glad you asked that question. I've got to go home and donate to buying the new clock, the gift. A friend of mine is trying to head up that effort, and I've just got to go home and do it. Write out the check.
Tell me some more about the new train clock.
From what I understand, it's going to be a gift to the town from its citizens. And am I correct that it's going to be at the depot? I'm not real sure. I need to go home and reread the information, but I think it'll be a wonderful gift, to have a big clock. I'm not sure exactly where it'll be located, but it's a great idea for a gift.
Will you be baking a cake for the 150 cakes?
If somebody asks me, I'll be happy to. I'm not much with layers, but I can do it.
What do you think the future holds for Ashland?
Oh, I can see only positive, because I think it's a wonderful place to live, and it's also such a good place to rear children. So many wonderful activities for children that are all inclusive, be it a soccer team or a scout troop or Indian guides, Indian princesses. And I see nothing but positive.
Well, that concludes my questions. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, it's been a privilege to be a part of this, because I love Ashland, and it's where my roots are, and my fine family reared us. So thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much.